Okay, let's just jump right in. A former prime minister getting sentenced to 10 years of forced labor. I mean, that really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's quite a headline. And we're talking about the Democratic Republic of Congo here, and a very high-profile figure, Augustine Matata Ponyo.
Right, not just any politician. He was the prime minister. And this isn't ancient history. It's happening now.
Exactly. And what's so compelling, I think, is how this one case sort of connects all these major themes, or, political power, huge sums of public money, and this big development dream that went wrong.
So for this deep dive, we're looking at a recent BBC News report to really get into the details of this corruption case.
Yeah, we want to understand who's involved, what the charges are, and maybe most importantly, what this tells us about, well, governance and development challenges in the DRC.
Okay, so the absolute core of it. Augustin Matata Ponyo, PM, from 2012 to 2016, he's been convicted by the Constitutional Court in Congo.
Convicted of corruption, and the sentence is,
Well, it's pretty stark. 10 years. 10
yeah,
years of forced labor.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And he wasn't the only one. Deogracias Mutombo, who used to be the governor of the central bank, he got 5 years of forced labor in the same case.
Wow, 5 years for him, too. So what exactly did they do? What were the specific charges that led to such, well, severe sentences?
The finding was that they embezzled public money. We're talking about roughly $245 million.
$245 million. That's a staggering amount.
It really is. And, the BBC report points out that a big portion of that money was meant for something specific, something really important.
That would be the Bukangalonzo agro-industrial park, I assume.
That's the one. This was meant to be a massive agricultural project. People were calling it, one of Africa's biggest ever agricultural investments.
The idea was to tackle the country's food shortages, right?
Yeah.
Which are chronic, sadly.
Precisely. A direct attempt to deal with this persistent, devastating food insecurity. I mean, think about that goal, a project literally designed to feed millions.
And the scale, too. We saw reports, Reuters, the African Development Bank Group, they mentioned it could create something like 22,000 jobs.
Yeah, that was the projection, 22,000 jobs. That kind of impact, well, it could genuinely transform communities.
Absolutely. And when you think about who this project was meant to help,
That's where the human cost really hits home. You've got 28 million people in the DRC facing acute food insecurity. 28 million.
and that's worsened by decades of conflict, isn't it? Since the '94 Rwandan genocide spillover.
Tragically, yes. Over 30 years of conflict have just exacerbated everything. So Bukangalonzo wasn't just like an economic plan on paper. For many, it represented real hope, a lifeline.
So let's look closer at Matata Ponyo himself. Former PM, obviously. He leads a political party now, the LGD.
Yes, the Leadership and Governance for Development Party. So he's remained politically active. His time as prime minister, 2012 to 2016, really cemented his position.
Wasn't he finance minister before that? I seem to recall.
He was. And interestingly, the BBC piece reminds us he actually got praise back then from the IMF
Praise from the IMF for what?
for stabilizing the economy during his time as finance minister, which, adds this whole layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It really does. Someone lauded for economic stewardship, now convicted of embezzling hundreds of millions. It makes you wonder.
It does. About the pressures, the system, maybe opportunities for corruption within that system.
And he even ran for president recently in 2023, though he pulled out eventually. Still a major player. How has he responded to the conviction?
Well, he denies everything, strongly denies any wrongdoing.
Hmm.
His lawyer told Reuters the ruling is unfair, politically motivated.
Okay, the political motivation claim. We hear that sometimes in these high-level cases.
It's a common defense, yeah. It definitely highlights that intersection, that sometimes blurry line between legal battles and political power struggles.
And Deogracias Mutombo, the former central bank governor. Less profile, perhaps, but a key role.
Absolutely key. Overseeing the nation's finances. And now he's also convicted, sentenced to 5 years of forced labor. The report mentioned he hasn't commented publicly on the verdict yet.
That sentence itself, forced labor, it sounds archaic almost. Is that common in the DRC?
It stands out to us, maybe, but according to the U.S. State Department info cited, it's actually legal there. If a court mandates it as part of a criminal penalty, forced labor is permissible under Congolese law.
Huh. Okay. A reminder of different legal systems worldwide.
Definitely. And the consequences don't stop there for them, right?
Yes, there was more. They're also barred from public office.
That's right. AFP reported that both of them are banned from holding public service positions for 5 years after they complete their forced labor terms.
So a clear signal to keep them out of positions of power for quite some time.
Seems to be the intent, yes.
Mm.
A long-term banishment from public life, effectively.
And this whole process, the investigation, the trial, it wasn't quick, was it?
No, not at all. The BBC report traces it back almost 4 years. It started with a report in 2020 from the DRC's own Inspectorate General of Finance.
So the internal financial watchdog flagged the missing funds from the Bukangalonzo project first.
Apparently so. That report seems to have been the trigger back in 2020, so yeah, it's taken a while to reach this point.
The report also mentioned, just briefly, other corruption issues: Brazil, Peru, Belgium. Just kind of name check them.
Yeah, I think the point there was just to sort of contextualize it, to show that, look, challenges with managing huge public projects and preventing corruption, well, they're not unique to the DRC.
Right. It's a global issue, sadly.
Exactly. Different contexts, different specifics, but the underlying problem of corruption impacting development is widespread. Makes this case study particularly relevant, maybe.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the key takeaways here. You got a former prime minister, a former central bank head in the DRC, found guilty, massive embezzlement, hundreds of millions.
And crucially, money meant for this vital agricultural project. A project designed to tackle food insecurity for millions in a country scarred by conflict.
And the sentence handed down is years of forced labor plus a ban from public office.
Precisely. And when you put all that together, it just raises some really big questions, doesn't it?
Like what? What are the wider implications here?
Well, think about governance in the DRC, for starters. What does it mean for public trust, for the rule of law, when people who've held such high office are convicted of this scale of corruption?
It must be deeply damaging to public faith in institutions.
Hugely damaging. And it impacts international development efforts too, right? It makes donors and partners question the systems, the safeguards. How can you ensure aid actually reaches the people it's intended for?
Yeah, you can see how a case like this could make potential investors or aid organizations much more cautious about getting involved in the DRC, or maybe even other countries facing similar governance challenges.
It definitely could. It really erodes trust between the government and its own citizens, and trust between the international community and the countries they're trying to help.
So I guess the final thought to leave people with is, what does it signify when a project with such potential aimed at helping literally millions of vulnerable people becomes a target for this kind of alleged grand corruption?
Right. What are the long-term scars left by that? Not just the missing money, but the broken trust, the stalled progress. It's a really sobering question to ponder.